everybody. It is my pleasure to welcome you to our annual J. Reuben Clark Law Society Women in Law Pre-Law Conference. My name is Candace Anderson, and I serve as the current chair for the Women in Law Committee for the J. Reuben Clark Law Society. And I really want to thank all of you for being here tonight, and thank BYU, of course, for allowing us to use this beautiful space. I attended law school here 40 years ago. The courtroom here was not quite as nice back then. It is absolutely gorgeous now, and we're so delighted that we can be here. And I want to thank Annett Jarvis. Are you here, Annett? Somewhere. She will be eventually if she's not yet. And the entire J. Reuben Clark Law Society International Chair. Forrest is here. Where did you go, Forrest? He's in the back, standing there waving as well. And we're so grateful that he is here as Executive Director for the Law Society. And for those of you who are unfamiliar, the J. Reuben Clark Law Society is a global organization comprising primarily of attorneys of faith. They don't need to be members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, but people of faith, and some of our audience members today are attorneys who have come in because we are having a leadership conference this weekend, and we have people coming in from all over the world, and we're delighted to have them here as well. And so we want to wish a very special welcome to those of you who are here for the conference. And I also want to acknowledge the attendance of many current law students. Current law students, you want to raise your hands so we know who you are? So those of you who are thinking about law school, those are the ones you want to talk to, and we're delighted that you're here, that you've chosen to move in this direction because it's a fabulous direction to be in. And some of you might be here just because you're interested. Some of you might be here because you heard, hey, there's a free dinner tonight, and that's true as well. But truly, I hope some of you are here because you've felt the desire to attend law school or join the legal profession, and you don't yet know if this is where you belong. And I hope that the message that all of you will leave tonight is that, in fact, you do belong. And so we're very fortunate tonight to have 4 amazing women who are going to speak to us tonight about their experiences in law school and in the legal profession and how they found belonging and created communities of support. And I know that all of us, whether we are years into our profession or have yet to even really apply to law school, you will find inspiration from their experiences. And before we turn the time over to the lovely speakers and moderator, I'd also want to direct you to our digital agenda, and the URL is on the slides above. And Carly, where is, and I'm sorry, I'm not seeing the URL code. Oh, just down there. Okay. I was looking for something more, a QR code. It's not a QR code. It's a URL code. You have to type it in. You can't just shoot it with your camera. But that is where our program. Oh, it is on the doors as well. So you could get it from the doors as well. And so this is going to include a little bit of information about how to join the Law Society and also how to connect to our student chapters, which we do have in law schools throughout the country and actually throughout the world as well. And so we are going to start out, though, with a word of prayer, and this is going to be offered by Carly Madsen, and she is a 3L, meaning a third-year law student here at BYU Law. And she also serves on our J. Reuben Clark Law Society Law Committee, and she has been an integral part with Jenny Wilson, who is our past chair, in really putting together this very special event. And after the prayer, we are going to have Emily Hoagland, who is right here, who is also a third-year law student at BYU. She is going to be our moderator and lead our panel discussion. So if we now could offer our word of prayer. Thank you so much, Carly.
Our Father in heaven, we're so grateful to be here this evening. We're grateful for the chance to gather in this beautiful law school as attorneys and students, prospective students and friends. We're grateful for the faith that binds us, and we're grateful for the gospel of Jesus Christ and other faith traditions that help us achieve a sense of belonging. We pray that those in attendance tonight will feel the Spirit, will feel that they receive answers to their own prayers and questions about whether they should pursue this path or how they can be more inspired in their practice of the law. We're grateful for all these things, and we pray for this in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen.
Hello, everyone. As Candace mentioned, my name is Emily Hoagland, and I have the fortune of moderating tonight's discussion. And I'd like to quickly introduce our 4 panel speakers you'll be hearing from tonight. You can find their bios on the digital agenda with the URL on the projected slide, as mentioned. So first, all the way on our right is Jennifer Fuentes Langi. She is an alum of J. Reuben Clark Law School and practices as an immigration attorney and founding partner at Fuentes Langi Immigration Law in Murray. Next is Adrienne Jack. She is an alum of Northwestern University Pritzker School of Law and practices as a wealth transfer attorney at Holland & Hart in Salt Lake City. Amaris Leiataua is a 3L here at J. Reuben Clark Law School and plans to practice at Holland & Hart in Salt Lake upon graduation. And finally, Jordin Annett is also a 3L at J. Reuben Clark Law School and is interested in practicing energy and environmental law on a global scale. I want to start by asking some questions that were prepared specifically for this event. I will make sure to open up to all of you to ask questions at 5:45 at the latest. Just know that we will be making a hard stop at 5:55 so that we can all enjoy our dinner that we are all looking forward to. If you do have additional questions after the hour, we encourage you to continue to ask those of us, of the JRCLS Women in Law Committee, or one of our panelists during dinner. So to begin, I would love to know what were some of the things that you all did in law school to help you cultivate or develop a sense of community, with our topic being finding belonging in the law.
I can go. I went to law school at Northwestern, and I was one of the few members at that law school and the whole law school to be members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And I also had a baby. I had about a 3-month-old baby when I started law school, and I felt very different than a lot of my peers. Many of them had worked for a few years and were single or had no children. And so it was just, I felt very out of place in belonging at my law school. And as I looked for ways to build connection, even though it seemed like on paper I was different than a lot of my peers, I felt like we could still build connection over common interests, and they were interested in my life because they didn't understand what I was thinking going to law school with a baby, and they were curious about that. So the more that I opened up and shared my story, I feel like that invited them to share their story as well, and we could build connection in that way, even though it seemed like we were in totally different phases of life.
So I'm bisexual, which is a fun fact to say just straight out the gate. And so coming here to BYU Law was going to be an interesting adventure for me on multiple levels. And so one of the things that I have found that have helped me find belonging in the law and here at the law school is just connection. Finding people who are willing to uplift you and to be in your circle of friends, even if for whatever reason you see differently in certain areas of life. Finding those people who are willing to see what you can bring to the table is incredibly important, whether that's through clubs, whether that's through individuals in your different sections, whether that's outside the law school, whatever it is, finding that support system that you need. And it's very different for everyone, so it's not something that I can just give you a roadmap and say, hey, this is how you do it. It's something that you need to figure out what works best for you, what works best for your mental health, and what works best for your schedule.
So I'm from Compton, California, and I had graduated from universities in California, and I only came to Utah to attend BYU Law School. And so out the gate, it was a very different experience for me. First of all, I'm a woman of color. This is primarily a white institution. And so my first year, and I'm also a first-generation college student, meaning none of my parents went to college. And so it was an issue of navigating law school, applying to law school. And when I finally chose to come to BYU, my first year was really hard. But what I've learned to appreciate about BYU's law school is that they're really intentional about supporting and creating groups, like affinity groups for students to join. And so your first year, you're part of like a Y-pod, and you're given a mentor to support you, and in that Y-pod, there's like 10 other students. And so I would not be like in this position that I'm at right now without friends at the law school. And I think that that's really what has kept me here, is friends.
For me, it was a couple of things. I ended up joining a study group that ended up being formed of brown girls, and there was one token white girl because we believed in affirmative action and providing opportunities for the paler among us as well, who have really been through a lot, right? That was nice, especially because law school was particularly intimidating that first semester, just because I'm also a first-generation college, grew up in Mexico, biracial, dad's Mexican, mom's Native American, so there weren't a lot of people who looked like me, and instead there were a lot of men who were they weren't first, they were second, third, fourth generation lawyers. They had wives who could pack their lunches for them and manage everything, so that all they had to do was study, where the rest of us were trying to work and trying to date and trying to survive. So that group in particular was of huge support. But something that was said to us on the last day of orientation, first year when we were feeling super overwhelmed back in 2006, they told us to have something other than law school. So I remember one of my classmates, for all of law school, he went fishing every Saturday. And that was fantastic for him, that he was able to hold on to that particular hobby, that part of himself. And for me, it ended up being, I participated in a performing group here at BYU, Living Legends. So I was crazy enough my first year to accept the student president position. I know that's not what the dean meant when he said have something other than law school, like a 20-hour-a-week job your first semester, but I wasn't going to ask for clarification. So I think that for me, what it does is that it keeps you grounded. It helps you realize there's something that's going to be still there once the grades come out and you're told you're in the bottom 50%, that there's still something worthy to you. And it helps you keep that context because we're all above average. So when they put you all together, mathematically, half of us have to take it for the team and be below average. And it's usually the ones that are like the strongest team that will be able to handle that type of rejection. So it was very important for me to have a group I felt at home with at the law school as I got more comfortable with branching out, but also having an identity that I could go to at the end of the day and realize these are the things I'm good at right now.
That's wonderful. That's actually something that came to mind as I was reading through these questions, was just that you can build and find community in the law with friends and study mates, but it's also wonderful to have another outlet or something that also brings support and comfort and keeps you holistic. I'm curious to know if any of you hesitated to pursue a legal career, and if so, what encouraged you to push forward?
Yes. I won't go into all of my background, but I found myself on the other side of the law multiple times. So that was a bit of a roadblock, to say the least, in me thinking of whether or not I could succeed in the legal field, purely because I wasn't sure anyone wanted me here. And then through some other things that happened in my life, I realized that that was actually a good reason as to why I would be a good candidate for law school, because I would be bringing in a different subset of both experiences and also mindset. And so, yes, I took a lot of time to think about if I really wanted to do law school, and I stopped and started my applications multiple times. And even now, as a 3L, I'm still wondering if I'm supposed to be here. But it's that part of you just have to decide for yourself, and who cares what anybody else thinks. Yeah, it's easier if everyone's on your side and is kind of pushing you along, but sometimes you just got to say, this is what I want and this is what I'm going to do, and use words you're not supposed to use in this law school to say, I'm going to do it. And so that's my biggest thing about it, is even if you don't feel like law school is for you, because of outside sources, you have to figure out what is on the inside that counts, as cliche as that sounds.
For me, I wasn't hesitant. I would say I was avoiding law school. So I'm a non-traditional student, meaning I'm a lot older, even though I don't look like it, than a lot of our students here. And so I had spent like 12 years in the field of education, and I was set on, being in education. I was teaching 7th grade in the hood, where I'm from, and I really enjoyed it. But then there was an incident where LAPD had raided our home, and it was such a traumatic experience for me. I don't speak gun language, but they were like holding up really big guns, and they were forcing us out of our home. And it was the first time in my life where I was really scared to say anything, like literally scared for my life. And that was a light bulb moment for me, because I graduated from UC Berkeley, from UCLA. I knew I had all of these abilities and talents to advocate for people. And when we tried to go look for a lawyer, there weren't any lawyers that spoke Samoan. And in all of LA, no lawyers that spoke Samoan. And I was thinking to myself, like, I have all of these skills that people in my community need. Why not go to law school? And so I finally put in my application and applied to law school. And I don't wish that I was here earlier, because I think that being an educator has made me such a better, I'm going to be a great attorney because of it. But, and it's funny because I came in wanting to be like a community lawyer, like doing public interest, and now I'm going to Holland Hart where I'm not doing that. But I think that you go through different stages in your life, and you are where you need to be at that specific time. And if you want to apply to law school now, then this is your time. And it's not just A through Z. We go through different parts of life before being where we need to be.
Those are very inspiring stories. I grew up in a small town here in Utah and didn't see very many female lawyers. I didn't have any in the town that I grew up in. And I knew I wanted to have a family, and that was a high priority for me, but I didn't know what that would look like in connection with a legal career. And so I feel like I had to take some steps into the unknown and not know the full plan of what my life would look like immediately when I applied to law school. Like I said, I went to law school with a baby, had another baby in law school, and now I have 5 kids, and I practice law full-time. And so I didn't know that at the time when I was applying to law school, what my story would look like and whether I could make it all work and fit the pieces in together. But I think it's about taking the next right step. And like they've said, if that next right step is law school, I think you can figure out a career that's meaningful and fulfilling, and maybe you'll change careers throughout the legal practice. But that was what kept me going, was just taking the next right step. I felt confident that I wanted to go to law school, and I'd figure out the rest when I got there.
In my undergrad, I was on a path towards social work. Columbine High School shooting happened my senior year of high school. I barely moved here from Mexico. I grew up speaking English at home, so that wasn't an issue, but the culture shock and the loneliness was pretty devastating. So when that shooting happened, it just kind of shook me, because I knew I was depressed, but I couldn't understand arriving at that point. And I couldn't understand arriving at that point and not anyone noticing. So that was my trajectory. I was going to go and do social work. Well, the summer before my senior year, majoring in sociology and on that path towards a master's in social work, I actually took on a social work type job with Juvenile Justice Services, where we went up to Strawberry Reservoir around there, and we had a camp for these girls who were working off their service hours, and it was 12-hour shifts, and I was terrible at it. I suddenly realized, I'm like, wait, what do you mean that these teenage girls don't want all my life experience and wisdom and guidance? And it was devastating. It was suddenly realizing, wait a second, I've had my whole life of wanting to solve, wanting to support, without ever thinking whether the people I would encounter as a social worker want anything to do with me. And obviously, why wouldn't they? Why would they? You know, if a social worker is involved in your life, you've reached the point where you're going through a lot of stress, and that's the last thing you potentially want. And I was devastated, and I was lost. And my brother was actually in his third year of law school. And as a cool joke, he's like, "You should go talk to someone at the law school. It's like super fun." He was miserable, but he heard that from me. And I came and talked to Carl Hernandez. And I sat with him and I told him my story, and he was a very good salesman back then. And so if you're apprehensive, don't talk to Carl, you'll be here next year. And he said, through a law degree, potentially, if you care about these things and you realize you can't potentially be there at the micro level, but you want to still be involved, you could potentially implement legislation that would impact all the juveniles in the state. And suddenly that just clicked for me. The idea of having a good idea and that somehow I could get a seat at the table to be part of the solution, and that's why I signed up for it. So when first semester grades came out and I was told I was officially in the bottom 50%, I marched over to his office and I told him I was dropping out, and I meant it. I was not familiar with failure. And he told me, he's like, "What?" And what he told me that day is the only reason I stayed, and he said, he's like, "You'll be successful as a lawyer, even though you don't look like one, even though whatever, if you are a people person and a problem solver." So he broke it down for me so that when classes came and concepts came and things that were particularly boring for me, I just held on, realizing this man promised me that I will be successful with this, even though I don't know what I'm going to practice. I'm getting married halfway through law school. I'm graduating pregnant. I never want to look at this again. But he told me if I was a people person and a problem solver, then this piece of paper would give me a seat at a table sometime in the future, yet to be determined. And I believed him. So.
Thank you. On that note, women and members of other minority groups often find themselves in the minority, maybe the only one with a seat at the table. How do you think women and other minorities can lean on each other for support without further alienating themselves from other colleagues and peers?
I've always appreciated when other women champion me and have my back on projects or assignments. And, even though we've made a lot of progress, I practice in Salt Lake, and most of my meetings are with all men, they're great. A lot of my colleagues are fantastic, but I still feel like we have a lot of progress to go getting more women at the table. And I've appreciated women that have my back and that champion me on projects and assignments, and I try to do the same for them we have each other's back and we're a team. It's not trying to put each other down or beat the other person out. It's really how can we lift women, and that includes encouraging them at meetings, giving them feedback, because sometimes we don't always get that from colleagues, and so I've found that very helpful.
I think one thing that is super important is sometimes in a room there's only one minority chair, and you have to be careful to not speak for other minorities, even if you are the one sitting in that minority chair, and to make sure that you are letting people understand that there should be more individuals who don't look like you, who don't act like you, who don't speak like you in the room. And that is a big way that you can support, is just by pointing out like, hey, we need to have more people at this table, we can make more space. With that being said, I also don't think you have to play nice with everybody. And what I mean by that is sometimes there are some people who just don't care. They are doing what they want to do, and they are focused, whether it's intentional or unconscious, where they're not thinking about this broader aspect. And sometimes in those instances, I'm not saying you be rude, and I'm not saying that you go and try to intentionally step on toes, but sometimes you don't move. And I think that's important, is just you say, no, I'm here, and I don't really care what you think, because I'm going to keep moving forward regardless of what you think.
I think one of the things I realized when I first started in my career, and it took me a while to start practicing law, After I had my 2 babies, I taught English writing at UVU for a couple of years, then I coordinated programs here at BYU. I worked in the honor code office until I realized, oh, I'm a defense lawyer, not a corporate lawyer. And that's when I went into immigration. But I think even when I started my career, and you have to consider I come from a very traditional, we still do machismo, in Mexico and throughout Latin America. So my perspective is first generation, and my mom was a stay-at-home mother. I didn't really have any examples of anyone who could really do both, be a lawyer, be a mom, right? So for me, I think the ideal when I first started my career was not, oh, let me be like this powerful career woman. I saw the ideal as, let me be like a man. So I tried to hide anything that could remotely be used against me, any vulnerability, anything that could potentially be deemed feminine, weak. Just picture Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump on that debate stage, right, where it's like trying so hard to be so level-headed, so logical, so, and eventually, as I got more comfortable in it, I realized that didn't feel right, that didn't feel like me, and I realized that as embarrassing or as, I may take a few hits, I may, not be able to live up here in this organization if I show more things about me that we somehow believe that we have to hide about ourselves. I figured, well, maybe it may not make my life easier, but maybe somebody younger, maybe somebody else will just be like, oh, that's nice. I'm so glad that you brought up that you have to leave early because your kids have soccer practice. Or that you brought up that, hey, you're having a lousy day because of cramps. Or you brought up that, hey, you know what, I actually am pregnant, but I can still do this job. So that for me, the most rewarding part about starting my own practice is the women I now employ and the opportunity I have to give them the experiences that I wish I had had 10, 15 years ago. And that our bathroom is always stocked with feminine products, that we always have snacks, that we have a very comfortable lounge area, that everyone knows when Jen does therapy. Like all these things, I've tried to normalize them as much as possible, not just for women around me, but for men as well, that ever work with me. Even to the point where I had a little bit of a mental crisis a few weeks ago, and I had to write a motion to accept late filing and get a letter from my therapist, and that would have been mortifying to me 5 years ago. I would have rather resigned my law license than admit that I was in therapy. And a few months ago, I ran into a judge in therapy, so I'm like, who are we pretending to be? We're all damaged. And so I just think women have this unique opportunity to, vulnerability is a little more permissible for us, and we just have to just do it and just open up, and we'll find that not only are we giving permission to other women, we're giving permission to men as well, and any other minority, gender minority, anything else.
I think the reality of being in the legal field is that it's a white, male-dominated field, and I think that white women have a lot of power and I would encourage all of the white women in this room, like once you're in these positions of power in law firms, to really look out for women of color, because it's, at least in my experience and from like my comrades here at this school who are also women of color, it's just a very, law school is already hard. Getting into law firms is even harder, but then dealing with microaggressions and implicit biases or just outright racism, and not having a seat at the table is really hard. And so the importance of allyship and really looking out for women of color is important.
Thank you. On the note of showing up as your whole self and just being all of you, I would love to hear how aspects of your identity have informed the way that you practice or the way that you experience law school.
As a bisexual person here at the law school, I can tell you that I am very good at making a point, and that I am very good at breaking down issues within other arguments, and I hate to say the word arguments, but that's sometimes what happens. And I don't think that I would have that ability had I chosen a school where being gay was something that was more open, something that you could be more open about in all facets of the law school. And so I can say that it has become a part of my identity. I mean, it's always been a part of my identity. It's never been something that wasn't there. But it's something that I am more comfortable with because it's something that I have had to look at from so many different angles and poke and have people prod because it's something new to quite a few individuals here. I can say that me being open about my sexuality was not necessarily a choice that I made coming into law school, but when I got here I realized that it was something that was not, it was just very much under the radar, if anybody was, and so I made a conscious decision one day that that was something that I was going to be more open about, and that was something that I was going to talk about, and that was something that I was going to really try to figure out how to build a bridge between the queer community and this law school in particular. And so having that conscious choice made by me brought it out to the point where I was no longer ashamed and I was no longer concerned about how others would perceive me because I no longer cared because I had made the decision and I was comfortable. And so that has helped me in my law practice because I just got to the point of like, who cares? And I don't mean that in a flippant way, but the people you meet, the people you interact with, yes, I'm not saying again, burn a bridge and just go step on toes, but the likelihood that you see them outside of the classroom or that they have like a huge impact on your life is really small. Now, my caveat is networking is great and definitely use it to your advantage. Taking that outside of what I'm talking about right now is once I realized that the interaction that I had with so-and-so or the issue that I had with the professor or the small comments that were made that were just not kind, that they did not impact me on a large scale, my life became so much easier because I was just like, okay, so you don't agree with me? Great. There are a lot of things that we could talk about that you likely don't agree with me on. And then once I also realized that, I was able to be more compassionate towards other individuals who were less likely to show me compassion because I felt much less threatened by what they were saying because, again, I was more comfortable with myself. So basically, having this be a part of my identity, being bisexual and being open about it and being willing to have conversations with people, many who I have found have never actually talked to someone in the queer community and had someone look at them and like actually have conversation instead of just like going off the handle and making this huge argument. Like being able to have these small moments, and sometimes they were great, sometimes they were not, but just being able to like leave them here at the law school or be finished with them once it happened and move on was huge for me. And like I said, it's helped me so that I can focus on my schoolwork, so I can focus on my career, so I can focus on interactions with people that, while in one aspect may not have gone well, in another aspect didn't. Moving that both into my personal life and my professional life has been a huge boon for me.
Being in law school is not just about me. It's about my family, it's about my communities. Like, I'm in law school, but we're all in law school together. And I think that once I graduate, and once all of you graduate, and even attorneys now, once you have that degree, you have a duty to serve others. And I think that that's an important thing to remember. No matter what you're practicing, you need to turn around and help people behind you because it's the only way that we'll all progress.
My first career out of law school was at a law firm in Washington, D.C., and like I said, I grew up in a small town in Utah. I didn't go to private boarding school. My parents were blue collar. I'm not fancy. And so when I got there, I felt out of place because so many people there seemed like they had gone to boarding school and had gone to Ivy League education and had these different lifestyles than mine. And I felt embarrassed about my background. I didn't want people to know where I grew up, what my upbringing was like, because it wasn't like theirs. And so that was something that I downplayed a little bit until I realized it was making me unhappy. I didn't feel like I connected with people. And further in my career, I ended up moving to Utah and working at firms here. And as I've opened up and let people know who I am and being confident in that and I joke about it and I call people out, or I at least note when they're saying things that are very privileged and maybe they don't realize it, is you just say, oh yeah, I can't relate to that, but that sounds accurate for your experience. So calling it out has been helpful for me to just, I am who I am. I'm not fancy. I might not be like everybody else, but that's okay.
I think for me, I realized that when I started therapy back in 2020 was a particularly wonderful way to really discover my identity, tap into some things that I had skipped along the way. My trauma manifested itself into maturing very quickly, skipping childhood, skipping those teen angst years, and I remember feeling so uptight because I was trying to look the part, but I felt miserable. So like for me, I realized that's the suit, the formality that works for someone else, the high heels that works for someone else, but I'm a tomboy. I grew up with 4 boys, rough and tumble, that's not me, right? So what's interesting is as soon as I embraced that I could, dress the way I wanted to dress, express myself, I wanted to express myself, now I have to pretend to be fancy, my practice just blossomed. And all of a sudden, my main form of advertising is TikTok, and don't knock it till you try it. But what's funny is my earlier TikToks, I'm like, super formal, jacket, ring light, speech, and then randomly, I think I just started, I just got sick of that, so then I just randomly tell stories, and all of a sudden people were like so drawn to the authenticity, and I realized, oh my gosh, how many years was I just trying to pretend to be someone else and trying to find success, and then the moment I just let go and wore my baseball hats and didn't put on makeup if I didn't feel like it, all of a sudden people just flocked. Why? Because lawyers are, for the most part, have a terrible reputation. For the most part are just no bedside manner, no ability to connect, let's make it as complicated as possible, let's make my explanation as complicated and complex, when it's like, no, if the person didn't understand you, it's on you, you're a bad teacher. So once I discovered that I didn't have to be fancy, that I could simplify it, I could be myself, all of a sudden the clients just poured in because they felt safe, they felt comfortable, and I never would have guessed that was the way to do it. So for me, it's been nice to embrace that I can bring all of that, and it allows me to empathize with my clients, and it allows me, at the end of the day, as an immigration lawyer, what I do is tell stories. I tell stories better than they do. Because what I tell my clients is, when you're soaking wet in a swimming pool, you're not going to feel a bucket of water. And they've gone through unimaginable trauma, but they just think that's normal. So my favorite part of my job is being able to get those stories out, and the things that people have told me when I'm wearing my baseball cap, when I'm just wearing my jeans, when I'm wearing my sweats, because somehow they're like, I don't know what it is about you, and I'm like, it's the informalness, that's what you're seeing. So I would encourage you that you don't have to say, okay, here's my lawyer hat, But you also don't have to like throw yourself in. I had to realize that was not my whole identity, right? Because then the rejection can feel pretty overwhelming. But for me, once I started embracing all parts, the first generation part, the biracial part, the I'm in therapy part, the I didn't do that well in law school part, the I'm a tomboy part, the you don't want to see me in heels part, it's a little awkward. So like all these parts, it just made me better at what I ultimately do, which is serving people and solving problems. So.
Thank you. Well, I'd love to open up